If you look around online, you'll find lots of videos showing how to create splash screens in Excel, but most of them are extremely basic. A plain user form, a simple label, and that's about it. In this video, I want to take things up a notch. I'm going to show you how to create premium image-based splash screens in Excel VBA, the kind that instantly make your workbook look like a polished professional application. And the best part is, these splash screens are ready to use. You don't have to design anything from scratch. Just tweak the images, customize the text, and they're good to go. We will build two versions. A clean modern splash with dynamic updates, and a premium splash screen where the image breaks out of the form and appears to float directly over your Excel window. And if you prefer something simple, both versions can also be used as quick 5-second branding screens. By the end of this video, you'll have reusable splash screens you can drop into any Excel project to give it a truly professional feel. They will be lightweight, elegant, and zero maintenance. Let's get started. I already have Excel open, so let's first jump into the Visual Basic editor. You can press Alt F11 on your keyboard, or you can go to the Developer tab and click on Visual Basic. That will bring you here into the VBA editor where all the magic for our splash screens is going to live. If you are unsure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. On the left, in the Project Explorer, you can see my workbook and a couple of user forms that I have already prepared. We'll start with the first one, which is a simple clean branding splash. This is the first splash screen we're going to use. I'll double-click on FRM Splash A. Visually, this is designed to be a very lightweight splash screen that you can show for about 5 seconds when your workbook opens. On the left side, I have this orange artwork that's just an image control. In your own projects, you can swap this out with your logo, a product image, or any brand artwork you like. On the right side, we have the main information area. At the top in the center, you can see App Name. This is a label that will display the name of your Excel application. We'll fill this from code so you can change the app name in one place without touching the form. On the top right, there's Version Info. That's another label for the version string. Again, we'll control the text from code using a constant, so updating the version is just a one-line change. At the bottom, you'll notice a thin orange line running across the form. This is just a label with a solid background color. It's purely decorative to separate the main area from the footer and give the splash a more polished look. Below that, we have the copyright section. The line that says Copyright 2025, developer name is one label, and the All Rights Reserved text is another simple label underneath it. There is no progress bar and no dynamic status text on this form. This version is meant to be a quick branding splash. After launching, this shows your app name, version, and copyright for a few seconds and then disappears. Now let's check out the code. Right-click on the form and click on View Code. Alright, now let's take a look at the code behind this simple splash screen. Don't worry, it looks lengthy because we're dealing with Windows API calls, but the parts you actually need to customize are extremely small. Let me walk you through it in plain English. Right at the top, you see a bunch of declare statements. Those are just a way of telling VBA, I want to call some Windows functions from user32.dll. They let us do things that normal VBA can't do, like remove the title bar, remove the thick border, and refresh the window after we change its style. You don't have to touch this section at all. It's boilerplate plumbing that we drop in and forget about. Below that, we have some constants. These are the parts that you will actually customize. App name is what shows up in the big heading label on the form. App version is the little version label on the top right. Copyright info is the copyright line at the bottom. And splash duration seconds controls how long this splash stays on screen before it closes automatically. If you want a longer or shorter splash, this is the only number you need to change. For our demo, I will show it for 15 seconds. For a live project, you may want to set it for 5 seconds. Next, we have a module level boolean mTitle removed. That's just a flag to make sure we remove the title bar only once. The activate event can fire more than once under some circumstances, so this flag protects us from reapplying the same style changes repeatedly. Now, I will explain the rest of the code. If you want to skip the explanation, then you may directly skip to the part where I run the user form. The remove title bar procedure is where all the window styling happens. The first thing it does is call find window A using meet.caption to locate the actual window handle for this user form. That's why your form's caption property must not be blank. It can be loading or anything else, but it cannot be empty or Windows won't find it. Once it has the handle, it reads the current style using getWindowLongPTR or getWindowLong on 32-bit MS Office. If you are still using 32-bit MS Office, I would highly recommend upgrading to 64-bit. Then it strips off a few specific style flags like WS Caption, WS Thick Frame, WS Minimize Box, WS Maximize Box, and WS Sys Menu. In simple terms, that turns off the title bar, the sizing border, the minimize and maximize buttons, and the system menu. After changing the style, it writes it back with set window long PTR or set window long on 32-bit MS Office. It does the same thing for the extended styles. It reads the extended style, removes dialog frames and edges like WSEX DLG model frame window edge, client edge, static edge, and writes that back as well. Finally, it calls set window pause with the SWP frame changed flag to tell Windows, I've changed the frame, recalculate the non-client area. That's what visually refreshes the window and gives you a clean borderless form. Now look at UserForm initialize. This is straightforward. As soon as the form is created, we populate the three main labels. So whatever you put in the constants at the top is what the user sees here. You don't need to manually update labels in the designer every time you change version numbers. The more interesting part is UserForm activate. This event runs when the form becomes visible. The first block checks a flag. So the first time the form activates, we remove the title bar and borders and set mTitle removed to true. Inside the same block, we also align the background image. We push imgsplash.top and imgsplash.left slightly to -1 to make sure there are no tiny gaps on the edges, and then we set the form's height to match the image height minus a few pixels to compensate for how Excel measures it. The idea is the form becomes just a frame around your artwork, so you don't get random empty space at the bottom. After that, here we handle the timing. Timer gives you the number of seconds since midnight. We add splash duration seconds to that to calculate when the splash should end. Then we loop until the current timer value reaches that target. Inside the loop, we call do events so that the form remains responsive and Windows can repaint if needed. Once the time is up, we call unload me to close the splash form. So when you put it all together, here's what happens at runtime. When the form initializes, it fills in the app name, version, and copyright from the constants. When it activates, it removes the title bar and borders, aligns the image, waits for the number of seconds you specified, and then closes itself. From your point of view, the only things you really need to worry about are: keep the user forms caption non-empty so the API can find it. Customize app name, app version, copyright info, and splash duration seconds. Make sure the control names on the form match: LBL ver, LBL app, LBL copyright, and IMG splash. Everything else is just infrastructure to make the splash look clean and behave like a proper polished application screen. Alright, now let's go ahead and run this splash screen so you can see how it behaves. You can run it directly from the VBE by pressing F5, or you can click the Run button in the toolbar. Normally, in a real project, you would show this splash from workbook open, but for now, we'll just run it manually. The form appears immediately, and you can see it's completely clean. No title bar, no borders, nothing that gives away the fact that this is a standard Excel user form. It just looks like a standalone splash screen from a real desktop application. And after a few seconds, in our case, exactly 15 seconds, the form automatically closes itself. It just shows your branding and then gets out of the way. No buttons, no user interaction needed. This is one of the easiest and cleanest splash screens you can add to an Excel project. And the best part is, it only takes a couple of lines for you to customize it for your own app name, version and copyright. Next, we'll move on to the slightly more advanced version of this splash screen where we add a progress bar and task updates. Now let us look at FRM Splash B. In the project window on the left, double-click FRM Splash B to open it. When you look at the form, you will notice that it looks almost the same as FRM Splash A. The layout is the same, the image on the left is the same, and even the labels for the app name, version and copyright are the same. The only new things are in the middle. I have added an orange bar, which will act as a progress bar, and just below that, there is a label that will show which task is currently being performed. Everything else is identical to the previous form, so we do not need to repeat that part. Now, double-click the form to open the code window for FRM Splash B. Most of the code at the top is exactly the same as FRM Splash A. All the API declarations and the constants for removing the title bar and border are unchanged, so I will not explain that again. As we scroll down, you will see this section. We will focus only on the new things that make this form behave differently from the first one. These two constants control how the progress bar and the task updates will behave. For the purpose of this demo, I am using 15 seconds and 5 tasks. That means the splash screen will stay visible for 15 seconds, and during those 15 seconds, I will simulate 5 steps of 5 tasks being completed. In a real-life situation, you do not have to stick with 5 tasks at all. I am only using 5 here because it makes the demo easy to follow. In your actual workbook, you would change task count to match the number of real steps your application performs while loading. For example, maybe your workbook loads user settings, then opens a data source, then refreshes the queries, then builds a dashboard, and finally initializes the interface. In that case, 5 is perfect. But if your workbook only needs 2 steps, then you simply set task count to 2. The splash screen will automatically adjust and show only 2 updates. And in a real-world scenario, you may not even need to set the total duration. The progress bar can run purely based on how long your tasks actually take. For this tutorial, I fixed the duration to 15 seconds just so the demo moves at a predictable speed, but in a real workbook, you are free to tie it directly to the tasks themselves. Next, just below that, we have 2 new internal variables. mProgressMaxWidth will store the full width of the progress bar. This is the width you set at design time when the bar is drawn on the form. We will use this number to calculate how wide the bar should be as it fills up. mSplashStartTime will store the value of timer when the sequence begins, so we can measure how much time has passed. Below that, we have remove title bar. I have already explained this earlier, so I will not explain it again. There is no change in this code. Now move down to the initialize event. This is the part that runs as soon as the form is created. Inside UserForm, initialize, you will see these lines. LBL progress is the orange bar. At design time, you set its width manually using the form designer. When the form loads, we save that width into mProgressMaxWidth so we know what full width means. Then we immediately set the width of the bar to 0 so that the progress bar starts empty. This is exactly how a progress bar should behave in most applications. It starts at 0%. Just below that, the initialization of the app name, version and copyright works exactly the same as in FRM Splash A. The only other addition is this line. We clear the status label so that it starts empty when the splash screen appears. Now let us move to the activate event. This is almost the same as before. The title bar gets removed the first time activate runs and the form is aligned with the background image. So far, there is no difference. But after that, instead of waiting a fixed number of seconds, we now start a timed sequence. The important lines are: so as soon as the form becomes active, we store the start time and then call a separate procedure called run splash sequence. This procedure controls everything about the progress bar animation and the task updates. Let us scroll down to run splash sequence. Here you will see the first new element. These are simply placeholder names for this demo. In your real application, instead of task 1, task 2, task 3, you would replace these with meaningful descriptions of your actual steps. For example, loading configuration, opening data file, refreshing data, and so on. The only requirement is that the number of items in this array must match the value you set in task count. Otherwise, your progress percentage will not line up. The code then loops through each task. For each task, it calculates how far along the process should be. It does that using this line. If we are on the first task, the progress is 1/5. On the second task, it is 2/5. Eventually, at the last task, it reaches 1, which means the bar will be completely full. Inside the loop, we update the two visual elements on the form. The first is the message just below the bar. The second is the bar itself. This stretches the width of LBL progress to match the current percentage. Update progress simply multiplies the full width by the progress percentage. So as the percentage increases, the bar expands from left to right. This changes the text in LBL task status, so the user knows what is happening. After updating the visuals, we call me.repaint to force the form to redraw. Then we calculate how long this step should take based on the overall 15-second duration. Each task gets an equal share of the total time. That timing is handled by the wait until procedure, which waits until the system timer reaches the target time while still keeping the form responsive through do events. Once the loop has gone through all tasks, the sequence is finished and the last line unloads the form. So in simple terms, FRM/B is FRM/A with 3 additions: a progress bar that fills smoothly, a label that shows the current task, and a timed sequence that splits the total splash time into equal chunks. The rest of the design and the borderless window styling remains exactly the same. Now, let's go ahead and run this splash screen so you can see everything in action. When I launch the form, you can see the progress bar slowly filling from left to right, and the task label updates underneath it. This gives the user a sense that something meaningful is happening while your workbook is preparing itself. Once all tasks finish, the splash screen closes automatically and your main workbook is ready to use. Now that we have covered the basic version with a progress bar, let's move on to the more advanced splash screen. This is the one where we introduce that pop-out visual effect we discussed earlier, and it gives the form a much more modern, premium look. Let's open that next form and take a closer look at how it works. In the Project Explorer, double-click FRM/C to open it. On the design surface, this one looks a little different from the previous splash screens. You can see the main blue image in the middle with the app name, version, and the money bag. On the right side, the person graphic is sticking out a little bit beyond the blue rectangle. When we run this form with transparency, that right part will appear to float directly over the Excel sheet, which gives us that pop-out effect I mentioned earlier. The white area around the image is not meant to be seen. That is the area we are going to make transparent. Now, double-click the form to open the code window for FRM/C. The first part of the code, all the API declarations and the style constants, is very similar to what we have already used in the earlier splash screens. Those pieces are responsible for talking to windows and removing the standard title bar and borders. We have already walked through that logic once, so I will not repeat it in detail here. The first important difference for this form is that we are also going to use Windows Layered Window feature to punch out a specific background color and make it fully transparent. For that, we have 2 extra things in the constant section. One is WSEX layered, which marks the form as a layered window, and the other is LWA color key, which tells Windows that we want to use a color key for transparency. Just below that, you will see this line. Key color is the color that will become invisible. In this example, I am using pure white. That means every pixel on the form that has the exact color VB white will be made transparent and will show whatever is behind the form. On our splash screen, all the extra empty area around the blue artwork is white, so that part will disappear and you will see the Excel grid underneath. The blue image and the person image are not pure white, so they will remain visible, which is exactly what we want. One thing you need to be careful about here, if your main image itself has a lot of pure white in it, then using white as the key color is a bad idea. Those white parts of the main picture will also become transparent and you will start seeing the worksheet through your graphic, which will look very odd. In that situation, you have two choices. Either pick a different image that does not use that color in important areas, or change key color to some other background color that does not appear in the main image. For example, you could make the empty area around your artwork a light gray or a slightly off-white color and then set key color to that same color. You may need to open the image in an image editing program, change the background to a unique color, save it, and then use that exact color here as your key color. The key idea is that whatever color you choose for key color must not be present in the parts of the image that you actually want to keep visible. Next, we have the familiar metadata. These work the same way as before. You change these 4 values to match your own project. App name and version go into the labels on the image, the copyright text goes into the footer, and splash duration seconds controls for how many seconds this splash will stay on screen before closing. Now scroll down to the procedure called Remove Window Borders. Inside this procedure, we do 2 things. First, we remove the usual window Chrome. Just like in FRM splash A and FRM splash B, we read the current style using get window long PTR, clear out flags like WS caption, WS thick frame, the minimize and maximize boxes, and the system menu, and then write the style back. That gives us a borderless form. The second thing is new for this form. After we clean up the extended styles, we also add the WSEX layered flag. By turning on WSEX layered, we are telling Windows that this window supports layered effects and we intend to control its transparency. Right after that, we call set window pause with the SWP frame change flag so that Windows recalculates the window layout with the new styles. The next small procedure is apply color key transparency. This is where the actual transparency happens. We pass the handle of the form, the key color, and tell Windows that we want to use a color key with LWR color key. The alpha value is set to 0 because it is ignored when we use a color key. After this call, every pixel that matches key color on that window becomes fully transparent. Now look at UserForm initialize. The first line is very important. We set the form's back color to key color, which is VB white. That means any area of the form that does not have our image on it will be white and will be punched out when we apply the color key. The labels for the app name, version and copyright are set exactly like in the earlier form. So from your point of view, to customize this splash, you only need to change the 3 metadata constants above and maybe replace the background image on the form. Finally, we have the activate event. The first part looks up the handle of the form using its caption, just like before. Then we check our flag mStyle applied to make sure we only apply the styles once. Inside that block, we call remove window borders, which gets rid of the title bar and borders and sets the layered style. Immediately after that, we call apply color key transparency, which makes the key color transparent. At this point, the form has no frame and every white area around the artwork is punched out. When you see it on top of Excel, only the blue image and the character on the right seem to be floating, and the rest blends with the worksheet behind it. The last part of Activate is identical in concept to the first splash form. We calculate the end time by adding splash duration seconds to the current timer value. Then we stay in a loop until that time is reached, calling do events so the form remains responsive. When the time is up, we unload the form and the splash disappears. So from a beginner's point of view, FRM Splash C is doing two extra things compared to the basic Splash. It turns the form into a layered window and it uses a color key to remove a specific background color. Visually, that gives you the floating pop-out effect where the artwork seems to break out of the rectangular form and sit directly on top of your Excel sheet while the rest of the form stays invisible. Now let's run the form so you can see exactly how this effect looks in action. When the splash screen appears, notice how the background of the form is completely gone. All the white area that used to surround the artwork has been cut out, and only the main graphic and the person are visible. The artwork appears to float, and the form feels more like a modern UI element rather than a standard VBA user form. This is something users do not expect to see in Excel, so it immediately makes your application look more polished and professional. Once the timer completes, the splash screen fades away and you are back in your workbook. That is the complete behavior of FRM Splash C. In the next version, we will keep the same floating effect but combine it with a progress bar, so you get visuals plus functionality together. Now let us look at FRM Splash D. We will double-click on FRM Splash D to open the form. Visually, this form looks very similar to FRM Splash C. You still have the floating pop-out artwork, the transparent background, the title label, version label, and copyright label. The only difference is that we have added back two elements that we used earlier in FRM Splash B. The first is the progress bar near the center of the form, and the second is the task being performed label right below it. Now, double-click the form again to open the code window. So FRM Splash D is basically a combination of the transparency effect from FRM Splash C and the task progress system from FRM Splash B. You will notice that most of the top part of the code is exactly the same as FRM Splash C. The API declarations, the style constants, the transparency setup, and the code that removes the border and title bar are all identical. I have already explained these things in detail in FRM Splash C, so I will not repeat all of that here. If you scroll further down, you will see the initialize procedure. This is similar to FRM Splash C, but with two additional lines to set up the progress bar and the task label. This is the same preparation code we discussed earlier in FRM Splash B, so we have already covered how it works. The progress bar width is reset to 0 and the task label is cleared, so the splash screen starts clean. Then, in the activate event, the sequence also looks familiar. Just like in FRM Splash C, the form removes its borders, applies transparency using the key color, and then begins the splash sequence. The only difference is that instead of waiting for a fixed number of seconds like FRM Splash C does, this version starts a multi-step progress sequence that runs for 15 seconds. The real work happens inside run splash sequence. Again, this is very similar to the code we used in FRM Splash B. We loop through a list of tasks, update the progress bar, update the task text, repaint the form so the user sees each change, and then wait for the correct amount of time before moving to the next task. In a real project, you would not hard-code task 1, task 2 and so on. You would replace these with your actual tasks just like we discussed earlier, and the value of task count should match the number of tasks your workbook genuinely performs. So in short, FRM Splash D gives you the full package. You get the transparent floating effect from FRM Splash C and the functional progress bar system from FRM Splash B. This makes the splash screen feel both modern and informative. Now, let us go ahead and run this form. When the form appears, notice how the background is completely invisible, just like in FRM Splash C. Only the artwork and the person are visible on top of the Excel grid. The progress bar begins filling gradually and the task label updates with each step. Visually, it looks polished, and functionally, it gives the user clear feedback about what your workbook is doing while it loads. That completes the final splash screen in this series. Alright, so that completes our two splash screens. You now have one classic ready-to-use splash and one image-based splash with that protruding floating effect. In both cases, all you need to do is replace the images and customize the text, and they're ready for your own Excel projects. You can also use them as simple 5-second branding screens if you prefer something quick and minimal. If you have any questions regarding today's video, feel free to post a comment below, or you can email me at support@tamexcel.com. If you wish, you can also post your question in the VBA Facebook group with relevant screenshots. If you like the way I explain things, and if you feel I can help you in your journey to learn Visual Basic Programming, then go ahead and like this video and click the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you'll automatically get an alert as soon as I publish my next video. I also want to remind you that there is a complete VBA playlist available. You can learn at your own pace from scratch with high quality videos, and it's completely free. So definitely check that out if you're serious about mastering VBA. And finally, if you enjoy my content and want to support the channel, you can also use the Super Thanks feature. It really helps me continue creating detailed tutorials like this one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy coding.